For the first time in 15 years, John Calipari is no longer the head coach at the University of Kentucky. I'm Nick Roush, joined by all my esteemed colleagues here at KSR, and we're rapidly reacting to the news that finally became officially official this afternoon when John Calipari released a kind of downtrodden 4-minute statement that was originally a very grainy video that I think we all were kind of laughing at. He deleted, re-uploaded, got to get a new tech guy over at the Cal house. But it is officially official. It is time to move on. We are putting the Cal era to bed today, and I want to start by asking Tyler Thompson, who I think many of the people in this chat might have fallen asleep Sunday night before things became official. So I thought it was like, well, nothing more is going to happen. We'll find out more news on Monday. And instead, I had Tyler talking to me just about how shocked she was. And now that there's been a little bit of time, how have you been able to chew on the reality that we're in now that John Calipari is no longer Kentucky's head basketball coach?
I think I was in shock on Sunday night. And confession, when I jumped on the Sources Say Rapid Reaction, I was in my pajamas. I think like everybody else was like contemplating getting ready for bed. And then the news broke and it was like, all right, well, I'm not going to see my bed for many, many hours. But since then, I think it's been, I've had time to digest the information, but for some reason it didn't really feel real until I saw Calipari say it in that message. And I think it was really useful for me to have him talk about, hey, I'm actually leaving. I think this is the right time. It was helpful for me in terms of like a closure standpoint to have him kind of address the Big Blue Nation and say, I think it's time. Kentucky basketball has a new voice and a new leader. And, let's think about the good times. I will still be a fan always. I've loved being here. It was my dream job, et cetera. So since that, video came out a couple hours ago, I've kind of been reflecting on my favorite Calipari era moments. And at least we can have that, at least we're not like still angry at Kyle or like, and we got to move on and all that. I think there is yes, this was the thing that needed to happen. But at the same time, let's remember the good times and not have it all be negative.
I might be a little like cynical, maybe is not cynical, but Zach, you sat through a bunch of his press conferences, and I know that for me, I was shocked that he would admit publicly that he's like, it's time to, like, he showed some humility there, and that's a side of Cal that you don't really ever see. He's a very prideful person. For him to admit that, I was shocked, Zach. I did not think he would actually get in front of a microphone and say, it's time to move on.
Yeah, I thought it was as you mentioned, the grainy video was kind of hilarious. It looked like he just pulled out a potato from his fridge and just decided to tell it to film him, and somehow it worked, and that's what they got. But yeah, you definitely got some realism from Cal there, which I loved. But I think this was just the time for it was time for everyone to kind of part their ways and move forward. And I'm someone that I can remember I remember the Billy G years. I remember a handful of the late Tubby years. But for me personally, pretty much most of my Kentucky basketball memories go back to Cal, start with Cal. The John Wall years. It was kind of my first real like introduction to Kentucky basketball, it feels like. But at the same time, things just weren't going the way they needed to, and they needed to move on. And I'm kind of, honestly, I'm almost a little bit more jacked about the future than I was probably, a few hours ago. Like, just kind of seeing Cal show a little bit of, like you said, humility, not trying to walk all over the fans in that, or even call out anyone really in that 4-minute video he did. So, I'm going to cheer for, well, not necessarily cheer. I don't know if cheer is the right word, but I'll watch Calipari play at Arkansas, or coach at Arkansas. I think it's going to be awesome whenever he comes to Rupp Arena for the first time. I really think that's going to be a fun atmosphere. So I'm already looking forward to covering that. Just kind of gives us all a breath of fresh air right now that I think we all desperately needed. So it's tough, but like I said, it needed to happen. So here we are.
Here we are. The video, the message was much needed. The thank you, I think, was a nice way to end things. But I selfishly wanted the last time I saw John Calipari to be pushing a dog stroller down Richmond Road. I mean,
that was so weird.
It might have been better than Cutler chasing Billy G down the hallway. I mean, that was I was entranced by the awkwardness. It was just it was mesmerizing. It's just one of those things where I was like drooling watching it over and over, just like what is happening? Jack,
How did we not get like the Curb Your Enthusiasm music on it too?
Oh.
That would have been perfect.
Oh, I saw it. I saw it.
Oh, yeah,
I saw
surely
it, yeah.
somebody did that.
It was out there.
Sorry, go ahead.
Jack, just what we've been kind of like, it's different for, especially for like Luckett and I, where you almost feel like a third party observer where you're just like helping in here and there. What has your life been like for the last 48 hours? Like, I want to know what the sources are saying. Is your ear falling off? Has your phone died yet? Do you have the two phones like Shams? Like, what has life been like for Jack Pilgrim? Because it feels like it's been nonstop. How many coffees are we at a day now?
I had 3 by 10:30 this morning. It's weird. People coming out of the woodwork that you haven't heard from ever, didn't know existed, that have some horse farm and Versailles story to tell you about. They just saw Billy Donovan at Whole Foods, and that guy is now our next head coach. Like, it's been hard to kind of just navigate those waters, because I'll be honest, I've never been through a legitimate coaching search before. I've never had this. So filtering has been a really, really weird thing, but I feel like now 72 hours into this, I'm starting to kind of get a firm grasp of, okay, this is BS. This is good. This is clearly false. So it's been weird. Yeah. Phone's dying at like 2 p.m. now. And it's been very, very, very interesting. Just filtering has been a good part of it.
Luckett, we have on 11 Personnel a show dedicated to the coaching carousel where we talk about intro press conferences and wild coaching carousels. You love this stuff. You eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But I'm curious, do you have your still emotional moment now that it's your coach, the guy that had you down in New Orleans, right? Like partying. What's it been like to kind of be like, oh, all right, we're doing this now. Have you had an emotional moment, or are you just like, put my guns up? It's time to freaking do this thing and parse through all this, wade through all this information.
Yeah, basketball's a little different because you don't have one kingpin and Jimmy Sexton kind of running everything. So from that aspect, it's a little bit more unpredictable. It seems like the leaks are more rapid in basketball searches. And I think that's what we're all parsing through right now. And I think really it was till Cal's video that you kind of get lost in the shuffle. But I think when we all heard him, it was like, oh, like this was this guy's dream job and he's having to move on from his dream job. And there was some, obviously some sadness in that, and that he had to move on. And so I think that was not just for me. I think that was a moment for everyone when you hear him and it humanized Cal to me, that video. And that's when I realized he was just like, oh, this is the end of a gigantic chapter of this basketball history. If you're going to sit down and write a book about Kentucky basketball, that Calipari chapter or chapters is pretty thick. And that's over now. And now there's going to be a new chapter. And there's going to be a lot of fun to come in the future. But all of us are going to remember this and probably tell our kids and grandkids about all the crazy stuff that happened during the Calipari era. And so to me, I don't think mourning's the right word, but it's kind of like, man, it's over. It's kind of hard to believe.
I did like too that he was looking right at us. He was speaking to us, because for the longest time too, as press conference people, where he's just, it feels like he's like sending a message to anybody but who he's speaking to. Whereas this time he was talking directly to us. And you're right, like that is as bad as the last 4 years were. There was 10 pretty darn good ones. And my reflecting, the reason why I'm a little more forward looking is because I had my sadness day in the Oakland game when I knew that this Cal wasn't the old Cal. And in reflecting back, I kept going back to the game at Arkansas, ironically, where he got tossed. I was sitting next to my dad for that game. We don't, hell, I could probably count a handful of Kentucky basketball games I've attended with him. I did the whole thing where bought tickets, and I worked afterwards, went down to the press conference, put my press pass on, and then went upstairs and cheered. And it was just a very, it's crazy to just to put yourself in those shoes just 4 years ago and how much can change so fast. And I don't know, like, I don't think any of us can pinpoint the one thing, right? It's always like it's a lot of things that sort of stack up, and then all of a sudden you're pulling out the blocks and Jenga happens, right? But it's so like there's a lot of demarcation where there's 5 bad years. I mean, dude, they won the SEC regular season that year. They had the SEC Player of the Year. Junior Nick Richards was pretty darn good. Like, you had 2 Elite Eights in the previous 3 tournament runs. One of them you lost on a buzzer beater, and one of them you lost in overtime to an Auburn team you shellacked just a month before. So it's crazy how fragile things were. And I think, like many of us here, Zach, you talked about kind of only like growing up with it. I mean, my freshman year at UK was the first Final Four, and I had never really remembered a Final Four before. Like, I had faint, fleeting memories as a child, but having the best years of my life in college when Kentucky was kicking everybody's ass, I wanted the redemptive story arc so bad for Cal. And Jack, I'm curious. Like, I know it was a lot of things. If there's one that, like, is there any reason why you think that we couldn't get that redemptive story arc, like that it wasn't? Because it felt like at times you were so close for the Cats to be back. I mean, they beat the crap out of Alabama. That Tennessee win to end the regular season, it felt like they were so close. Can you try to pinpoint why it just like seemed like they were pushing the ball up the hill, but they couldn't get over it?
It was the pressure. The weight of the world was on this program's shoulders and the players. And I got text leading up to the even that Oakland game that it's kind of reality is kind of starting to settle in that, yeah, we can be built for March. We can get excited about, how fun that looks on a headline. But when we realize the magnitude of what this means and just the future of Kentucky basketball starts tonight at tip-off on Thursday night in Pittsburgh, I think there was kind of this reality that set in of, oh man, see you on the other side. And I think there were a lot of things that led to that pressure and how it didn't have to be this way, whether it's trusting the wrong people around the program with the assistants and, kind of right-hand men and different kind of factors of all of that, I think led to that demise just in terms of, I think everybody kind of had their backs against the wall with fists up. It was like that's the in the office when Pam and Michael and Dwight, I think they're all looking at each other with the guns. It's kind of how the vibe was around there at the very end. And I think everybody just kind of knew that we've been putting this thing together with duct tape and holding it together, the boat sinking and trying to, put the tape up on the wall, knowing that there's no saving this. We can't just keep moving forward the way that we have. And I think all it took was the dam to break with an Oakland loss. And they kind of tried to kiss and make up. And we kind of got another follow-up kiss and make up with even when he had already agreed to be the Arkansas head coach. I think they were scrambling and it got really, really weird there in the last 24 hours. But I think all parties involved realize that this is a very, very good, positive, fresh start for both sides. And I think it's very rare you get a win-win in basketball and in job searches and moves like that. You're getting a fresh start for both sides, where I think Cal's going to be very successful at Arkansas, and I think whoever the replacement is for John Calipari is going to be highly successful here as well.
Yeah,
I just want to jump in real quick. Like, I will say, I think that's why Calipari's video was important, because he was able to say to fans, I think it's time for another voice. It's clear the program needs to go in a different direction. And for the people who have defended him the longest, most of, younger fans who haven't known a coach at Kentucky other than Cal, I think it was really, really valuable for them to hear him say that, just for a closure's sake. Because now I think we can all just unite as one fan base and get excited for what's next. Sorry, I interrupted you, Adam, but go ahead.
No, I think you kind of hit it. I'm just going to say another way. It just felt like everyone involved was being held hostage. And it was just like, what are we doing? We're kicking the can down the road. No one's happy. This is a miserable existence, I think, for everyone involved. And anything good or bad just became like a a fight between what side you were on. And so even for Cal, I think, and so I think it was just best for everyone. And for Cal, like he gets a chance, I think, to be rejuvenated and maybe some changes he doesn't necessarily want to make at Kentucky. Maybe he makes them in Arkansas. Like, is he able to sign 5 top 20 players at Arkansas? Or is he only able to sign 3, and then that forces him to maybe go in the portal more? And does that end up being addition by subtraction for him when it comes to finding more success? And for Kentucky, I think they get the chance to hit the reset button here. It just had gotten really stale, and it was just there was, like Jack mentioned, there was so much pressure, and that it was just only going to keep growing. Like, it wasn't going away. It was just a huge cloud, I think, hanging over everyone. And I think by going the separate ways, people get away from that cloud. And I think it could be, a good move for all parties. And now the one thing that makes it awkward is that he's in the conference, right? And like he's going to come into Kentucky's building and play them next year.
I love
could be
that.
with some UK. It could be with
Me
some
too.
UK players on the roster, and then it gives like the new UK coach is going to have a huge game with a lot of pressure riding on that UK coach to win that game at home specifically, and so that alone, it adds another kind of layer to this whole situation.
And they saved $33 million.
That's
baby.
huge. I love too, Zach. Like you weren't in Louisville, like Luckett and I, but I just love having Cal not go away, because that's one thing I felt with Pitino, where like ever since he got to St. John's, it's like, yes, feed me your bull crap. I love it. I eat it up. And like as much as I grew tired of Cal's bull crap, like we're gonna get some more of it, and it's gonna tick us off, but we're gonna love it at the same time, right? Like Calipari ain't going nowhere on KentuckySportsRadio.com. You bet your sweet buns we're going to have plenty of posts about what he's saying, what's happening at Arkansas. And it's going to be fun until here's the one thing that he's good at too. He's good at beating rivals. So I am a little worried about Arkansas coming to Rupp Arena next year. I think he's going to have those guys gassed up for that game.
Well, it's funny you actually mentioned writing about Calipari, because I was thinking as kind of things were unfolding today, I was like, man, there's going to be a moment next season where I'm sitting next to Jack in Rupp Arena and Calipari is up on the post-game press conference, and he's going to be wearing an Arkansas shirt, probably saying the exact same things that he's been saying for 15 years, but from an Arkansas perspective. So I think that's going to be that will probably be hilarious to me. I think Jack's probably looking forward to that too. Now that that's going to be for all UK media as well. That's just going to be a very full circle type moment. And I think we're all just going to kind of laugh with each other. Cal will probably do it on purpose because he knows that he's kind of been, like the one-liner guy over the last 15 years. So that's actually something I'm really looking forward to. Like, I'm looking forward to being like, all right, I watched John Calipari's pre-Kentucky press conference. Like, here's what he said about Kentucky. Like here's how he thinks his guys will match up against Kentucky. Like that whole narrative or storyline of it is what I'm already looking forward to. So I'm excited for that bit of it.
We got to bring Jerry Tipton out of retirement for that one.
I thought the same thing.
It's not media day, Cal. It's not coach day. It's media day. Jack, So is there any, I'm sure you're going to have another Sources Say soon to update us. There's hot boards happening all the time. There's plenty happening on KSR Plus. And Steven, you need to remind us of the code to get $1 for 2 months. There's a YouTube code. Is it MyUK1, I believe? I mess up that code all the time. Somebody, we'll figure it out. But you should be on there because Jack's got plenty of intel right there. How much are we buying, selling Danny Hurley? I'm selling, but that's just because I bought in for like 6 hours and now I'm like, wait, that I know, but I'm selling. I'm not buying. I'm actually surprised if Scott Drew isn't there in like 3 days, but maybe that's just me. Like, it feels like it's been a week and it's been 2 days. And so everything goes back and forth. So Jack Pilgrim, right now, sources saying what? Where do we go?
I don't think the list is going to get any farther than Scott Drew, which I think is a great thing. Like I feel pretty confident in saying that it's going to be really hard for him to turn down that situation. I know there's some rumors of like a soft no. That has not been the case. I feel pretty strongly that at worst you have Scott Drew. And I think that's an unbelievable situation. I think people are overrating the personality part and, you know, kind of just looking big picture that like where he came from, looking at just the overall record. But understand he kind of built that program up from the rubble, and to get to the point where it is just a perennial contender says something. And for what he would be able to do at Kentucky and this new platform and the resources made available to him, I think he would crush it. But they're going to go for Dan Hurley. They're going to give it their damnedest, and the money is going to be there. The conversations are going to be happening. And I was told, I mean, before even the postseason started, that Dan Hurley, Kentucky, this would be a job that he would listen to. This is a guy that people understand the Northeast ties. I get it. I totally understand how hard it is to believe that a guy that has it made just so perfectly up there, that why would he have any reason to leave? This is a guy that is hungry. He is just uber obsessed with just being the king and just wanting the next and what's bigger and better. And there is kind of a sense of, okay, going into the tournament, if we go back to back, like, yeah, it'd be great to go three-peat. That's an unbelievable thing. Everybody wants to three-peat. But if he's able to bring Kentucky out of the dumps where it is right now and kind of re-solidify himself as the king of college basketball at Kentucky, he solidifies himself as an all-time legend, and nobody can ever touch that. And that's something that makes him tick. And I think that's something, the personality-driven and competitive fire that he has, people are just underestimating it, just kind of what makes him go. I know he threw I can't move my wife around because I can't get divorced again. I get it. But ignore the stuff that comes out immediately after winning a national championship. All that's overrated. You shared the stuff eloquently about what Cal said immediately after saying that he wasn't going to leave Memphis. And we heard Danny Hurley himself said he was never going to leave Rhode Island after 5 days later left Rhode Island for this UConn job in the first place. So just listen. I'm not saying it's a yes. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but the money will be there. And he is somebody that has the personality for Kentucky. And I think he realizes that he wants to be king, and you can't be a bigger king than at the University of Kentucky.
The laugh and the joke was a hilarious denial. Like that's the most like open-ended denial in the history of denials.
If you assume that these coaches are lying when they talk after these games, you would probably have a success rate of truth percentage right around 63, 64, 65%. Nick, what did Tommy Tuberville say? They're going to have to carry me out of here in a pine box. And 2 weeks later, his ass was at Auburn. So these guys lie. I mean, it's just it's part of the business. And so, yeah, I think watching to see how that plays out is interesting. I think in no way in 2012 is this even a possibility. But I think the money issue, SEC has got Scrooge McDuck money. So they can make him an offer he might not be able to refuse. And I think that is the real kicker here in Kentucky's pursuit of Hurley. Like, is there a tag that UConn just can't get to and that he just can't turn down?
One thing that I'm curious about too, and maybe Jack, you can speak to this, because we heard about when Nick Saban retired, the Alabama discount that some players took from a nil standpoint because they were going to play for Saban because he would get them the league, and that's where you make your real money, right? That was definitely happening at Kentucky. Is the nil infrastructure in place for the next guy to step in? Did they do enough with the La Familia stuff at the end? Like, is there enough there to where that won't be a sticking point for whoever the next coach is?
Those people are still here and are ready to give today. Phone calls are already being scheduled. And then you're also getting the pots of money that were closed, tight, sealed with no chance of return. Those people are coming out and saying, whatever it takes to go get Danny Hurley, here's my share. So that's also something to keep in mind. UConn and its financial struggles, yes, they will. He is obviously going to get a raise no matter what. He's going to get an unbelievable pay raise there. And yeah, there is something to be said. Will he take the hometown discount at UConn where he already has it made? But if he can get an offer that is just so unbelievably better that UConn could never touch, it's going to be something that again, you got to keep the wife happy. She can be happy in Storrs, Connecticut, making $8 million a year, but she's making $12 million a year. The long-term 5-year deal of whatever that would consist of. Think of the big pot, not just the convenience of staying with comfort. I think they're comfortable being uncomfortable, and I think that's also something to keep in mind.
Well, we are going to start wrapping things up, but I got to just ask predictions right now. You've got to take a guess. You got to shoot from the hip. Zach, who's going to be the next coach?
Scott Drew. And I think that the smoke has been there for so long that that's just the easy. I don't even think it's the safe choice. I think it's the right choice. I think Scott Drew he's the guy that obviously Mitch has been kind of rumored as buddy with for a while. You know, I don't know how true that is or not, but I mean, and Jack mentioned it, like, can anyone guess how many NCAA tournament appearances Baylor had since 1950 before Scott Drew took over? One. They had one in a 50-year span, and then he came in and they won a national title. They've been to the. I mean, I'm looking right here. They've been to the NCAA tournament like 8 times in the last 10 years, something like that. So he's took that program from the bottom, made it into a giant. He's a very good recruiter. I don't care what his personality is. If he comes in and wins, nobody at Kentucky or any fan is going to care. So I think what's the expression? It's like the simplest or the easiest choice is often the simplest answer is often the easiest, something like that. That's the case here, where the easiest answer. Yeah, that was the saying, right?
Yeah, Occam's razor.
Occam's razor, yeah.
The easiest saying or the easiest answer here is the simplest one, and that is to go get Scott Drew. And I think that's ultimately what Barnhart does. Although I would, if they get Hurley, I would be ecstatic, because I think Hurley is, like everything Jack just said, he's on a warpath, and I think he would do great at Kentucky. But I do think that Scott Drew is ultimately where they land. There's just been too much smoke for too long, and I'll go with him.
Anybody else? I'm on the Scott Drew train, and I'm completely out on the Billy Donovan one too.
No Billy Donovan, no Jay Wright. If these guys haven't played or coached college basketball in the last 5 years, they should not be considered for this job. And I think it's kind of ridiculous that they're even being rumored as possibilities, to be honest.
Baylor was Louisville Kenny Payne bad when Scott Drew got there. And then in year 3, they could not play a non-conference game. They played nothing but conference games. Baylor was at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the barrel in the Big 12, which became kind of the best conference in college basketball, I would say right around probably 2014-ish. And he built a team that has gone toe-to-toe with Bill Self at Kansas the last few years, that won a national title. I think it's been quiet around him in the search for a reason to this point. I think he is a real candidate, and I think I'd be willing to bet that he's Mitch Barnhart's number one option or number one target here. So I think we'll know by Friday, and I think Scott Drew will be the next head basketball coach in Kentucky.
Tyler?
I mean, I kind of agree. I think that it's good that Barnhart is at least putting a little bit of info out there that he's willing to swing for the fences and offer Dan Hurley a Brinks trunk full of money. I think he's probably doing that knowing that the likelihood that Hurley takes that is lowish, but at least he's getting that out there so fans don't think that he's settling for Scott Drew. And I'm not saying that it would be settling for Scott Drew, because I do think that that's a very smart choice. But I think that Scott Drew, and as Jack kind of talked about this a little, he doesn't have the most exciting personality. But maybe Kentucky needs that after 15 years of Cal. I mean, I know all the best, coaches have had just big, huge personalities, and they embrace this program and all of that. And Drew's not exactly what you think of when you think of those things, but I'd be happy just to focus on the basketball for a while and win some games. And if it takes like a more mild-mannered person who is really good at recruiting, he's built a perennial winner at Baylor of all places, and he can unite the fan base, that's great. But I do think that there's something very smart about at least trying for Dan Hurley, because you're proving to fans, I'm not just going for this guy that you all have heard that I'm friends with, and that's the only reason. I think you at least got to show that you're willing to make another offer. Maybe that's why all this Billy Donovan stuff's being floated out too. He's consistently been mentioned among the top candidates. And if it were 10 or 15 years ago, I'd be all about it. But Billy's been in the NBA for almost 10 years. The game has changed so much, even in just the past few years. And not only that, he'd be coming from the NBA. It's not like he could bring a whole team of college players with him. So as lovely as the Billy Donovan dreams were, they were turned down twice. So, and it's a different time and a different age. And I think Scott Drew makes a lot of sense, even if it's not the most exciting name or the most exciting personality. I think he would be a smart move for the next era of Kentucky basketball.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I'm kind of surprised. I think in a big picture standpoint, I could understand if you thought that Billy Donovan was just this X's and O mastermind that could come in and you put roster managers around him that could just be bang up recruiters, handle the NIL and portal world, while all he does is just nothing but coach basketball and be the face, I guess, if you will. But talking to NBA guys, I was kind of surprised at some of the pushback on that of, hey, this guy does not have a great reputation from just a basketball X's and O standpoint. There's a reason why the Bulls have kind of been treading water for as long as they have. And it's an easy gauge of, if there are rumblings about your guy potentially leaving, you kind of get the pulse of the fan base to see what their reaction would be. And all of them are almost like, take him, enjoy him, have a great time with Billy Donovan. And if that's the case, you don't want to kind of build that up and get excited for it. I appreciate that he was Mitch Barnhart's golden goose for 20 years and that, you know, you want to try to recreate some of that magic. I totally understand where the intrigue would be there, but the more digging that there is, just the timing doesn't make any sense. Talking to people around Billy, that he's in the middle of the play-in picture and wanting to get to the playoffs, as unlikely as that sounds. So at minimum, it's going to be 8 more days before he even becomes an available candidate. So I think, as you know, Adam said earlier, I think this is a move that Mitch is going to want to get done quickly. It's going to be a gutted roster. You got to move fast. That's another thing. Billy has no guys that you can bring with him. At least Scott Drew, you have VJ Edgecombe there to say, hey, come with a roster of, top 3 recruiting class guys that you could bring with you to kind of at least piece something together where you can at least say you're somewhat competitive. I just don't see the vision there for a Billy Donovan roster to be championship or even second weekend competitive. And I think that's kind of something to keep in mind. I agree. I think Scott Drew is the safe bet, but it's a comfortable one that I think he could be really, really good here. But I don't know, something in my gut says that Dan Hurley is going to be the guy. So maybe it's just false hope, maybe, but there's just too much smoke for there to not be fire. And I'm going to pour some gasoline on it. Danny Hurley's my guy.
Will it be Dan Hurley, or will Dan Hurley be the Scott Drew to our Louisville coaching search? They were swinging big on Scott Drew when really the whole time their guy was Dusty May. Well, they missed on that guy too. Hopefully a similar fate doesn't follow this Kentucky coaching search. We don't need that much chaos in our coaching search.
Who would be UK's Pat Kelsey?
Jerome Tang, and that's a
Jerome
big ol' hell
Tang.
no.
Gang.
Shaka Smart.
It'd be Shaka.
I don't want to do Shaka.
Shaka's our Pat Kelsey, right?
But an offer that you really can't refuse is 2 months of KSR Plus for $1.
Yep.
$1, folks.
Wow. UK
one. $1
We'll get that promo
UK
code.
one.
We have the membership. This has exploded this week, and we're so grateful for everyone who's joined us. The message board is just awesome. It's updating literally by the second with people talking about what they're hearing, what they're feeling, what's next. It's been really cool to grow that community. So
I like that we had a guy who did the math on 14 coaches and compared 12 resume points. It's see, that's great. They're doing our work for us. So join
and tracking
the community
planes.
now. It's great. It's wonderful. Also, don't fall too much for him. They don't interview in these college towns. Billy Donovan's playing the Knicks tonight. He's not flying to Lexington, people. Ryan, come on, Ryan. He's not in Lexington. He's coaching.
Ryan is such the perfect demographic to fall for that, though, because he was
Exactly.
covering it back in the day. It's great.
It really is. It's been great hanging out with you all. We'll have plenty more following this Kentucky coaching search. In the famous works of Mark Stoops, we're just getting started, bro. There's plenty to come. We'll see y'all later.